The spiritual secrets of death are an everlasting spirit, molded from the breath of God. Our bodies are vehicles, but not who we actually are. Our bodies are made of clay, and this earth is the oven in which we are baked and glazed into divine pottery. The earth is not our home, but a cocoon, a gestation period where we are molded into who we were written to become. Death is not an end, it is a transition, a metamorphosis, in which we undress our caterpillar bodies to unveil our everlasting butterfly spirits. Everything living begins with a death, a loss, or a sacrifice. It is in the compost of death that life grows and evolves. The cocoon must be torn for the butterfly to emerge, and the seed must split before a tree can sprout. Life is dying to evolve. Death is a bridge that leads to the evolution of our consciousness, for as Allah says, what is to come is better than what has gone by. 93:4. If you tell a baby in the darkness of the womb that there is a world of light, mountains, seas, and stars, it will find it hard to believe. Just like that baby, our understanding of reality is limited to what we have experienced in the womb of Mother Earth. And just like a baby, we too must one day leave the womb of this world for a different reality. Our bodies will one day die, but our spirits will continue living. Death is not an end, but a means to a God who has no end. We are not stones, we are seeds. We are not buried when we die, we are planted. To rise in the idea of existence after death is even alluded to scientifically, through the law of conservation of energy, which states that in a closed system, energy is neither created nor destroyed. In other words, when our bodies die, the light of life within us is not destroyed, but transformed. Death is a season, a winter for our spirits, which have been written to awaken in the spring of resurrection. Death is the door to eternal life, for it is only through dying that immortality can be experienced. It is only through death that we actualize the priceless value of life. We experience loss or little deaths throughout our lives as a means of reminding us that nothing on this earth is forever. Only Allah is eternal. Everything here will one day return to Him. As the Quran says, and certainly we shall test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lives, and fruits, but give glad tidings to the patient. 2:155. We are mere sandcastles near a rising shore, and it's only a matter of time before the ocean of unity pulls us back into its embrace. From relationships that dissolve, to friendships that end, and dreams that break, everything is constantly dying and being reborn. The atoms and cells in our bodies are constantly dying and regenerating into a new existence. Every night, the earth dies to the day before. Every time you sleep, you taste death, until God resurrects you into a wakeful state. 3. It is He who makes the night as a robe for you, and sleep as repose, and makes the day a resurrection. Quran 25:47. We are constantly being recreated into a new creation. Death is intimately braided into life. Do not fall in love with this fleeting world. Do not get used to its comforts, because everything here is falling apart, dissolving, and decaying with the passage of time. Wash the dead and your heart will be moved, for surely an empty body is a profound lesson. Imam Ali. The pricelessness of time. We are veiled from the sun of reality by the clouds of our attachment to this life. When we learn to surrender our life to God and truly make peace with death, the light of awareness pierces our consciousness, unveiling the truth. This is profoundly depicted through the story of Alexander the Great's death. When Alexander the Great became deathly ill, he called upon the greatest healers and doctors from across the world. He showed them his riches, his diamonds, gold coins, and rubies, and said that unbelievable treasures would be given to the one who could cure him. But no herb, pill, tincture, or potion affected his worsening condition. The great Alexander, the most powerful man on earth, was dying, and he could do nothing to prevent it. When Alexander finally surrendered and accepted his fate, he called the viziers and noblemen of his court to a meeting, and he told them that when he died, he had 3 wishes for them to fulfill. First, he requested that his physicians be the only ones carrying his coffin. Second, he asked that the path leading to his grave be beautified with gems and riches from his treasury. Last, he requested that his hands be dangling out of his coffin. Alexander explained, "I want my doctors to carry my coffin so that my people know that when the time for death comes, No earthly healer could prevent it. I want the road to my grave to be paved with diamonds and gold so that my people see that, despite all my riches, I cannot take any of my treasures with me, and I could not purchase more life than I was given, for life is priceless. Finally, I want my hands to dangle outside my coffin so that my people may see that, like everyone, I came to this world with my hands closed, with nothing in them, and now when I leave this world, I am leaving with my hands open, with nothing in them. Alexander the Great saw that his endless wealth and historic successes could not save him from death. This story reminds us to be conscious of the time we have left, for time is a commodity we can never get back. We can sin and be forgiven. We can become sick and heal. We can become poor and remake our fortune. But when time passes, it can never be returned to us. It is the seeds of charity, love, knowledge, and good deeds that we plant for the sake of Allah that blossom through the seasons beyond our life. Only the good deeds we acquired come with us to the grave. Wealth and children are an ornament of the life of the world, but the good deeds which endure are better in your Lord's sight for reward, and better in respect of hope. Quran 18:46. Our fortune, our worldly success, our family and friends, everything that is mortal will be left behind. As one mystic profoundly said, every single person you love in this world will either bury you or you will bury them. There is no other way. For losing a loved one, truly accepting the loss of someone we deeply love, is one of the hardest trials we will ever face. It is easy to get lost in shameful thoughts about the regretful things we did or did not do, or the words we said or never got the chance to say to the one who passed away. The key to walking through loss is not to get so lost in our grief and pain that we miss witnessing the loving presence of Allah that embraces us even in the moments that shatter our hearts. Grief has a very holy purpose. Through our feelings of loss, we actualize true gratitude. When we begin to see the depth of our grief as reflecting the depth of love that we felt, the holes that a loved one's spirit once filled go from triggers of sadness and regret to altars of gratitude. The children's book character, Winnie the Pooh, beautifully illustrates this when he says, "How lucky I am to have something that makes saying goodbye so hard." May we not allow our grief for the loss of a loved one prevent us from being grateful for having had that person in our life as long as we did. Grief is normal, and our faith is not lessened by it. After all, the Prophet Muhammad mourned his wife and the love of his life, Khadijah, many years after she passed. Cry the tears you need to cry, but in the midst of your pain, do not forget that your Lord loves you deeply and sees you fully. Do not be afraid, I am with you, all hearing and all seeing. Quran 20:46. No matter how heartbroken we feel over the loss of a loved one, we must remember that Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. 2:286. When the weight of life seems too heavy to shoulder, it is not because God is trying to break us, but because God is trying to unveil a strength we never knew we had. To better understand this, consider the following. There is a plant called Baker's globe mallow, Liam nabaca, that has such a hard shell. One of the only ways it can germinate is through a wildfire. As a result, for more than 100 years, this seed can lie dormant under the soil, not manifesting a single sprout. It's not until a wildfire blazes through the forest, softening and breaking the shell of its seed, that water can reach the core of the plant and germinate it. While most trees, plants, and flowers burn in fire, the Baker's globe mallow grows because of the fire. Sometimes the wildfires of pain don't just destroy what we love, they also unveil hidden seeds of beauty and strength within us that we never knew existed and were unable to manifest in conditions of ease. God sometimes tests us in order to break the shells of our hearts, creating the opportunity for us to manifest into a garden of faith. Just as an egg must break for a bird to be hatched, sometimes God has to keep breaking our hearts until a path to the light is opened. The more we are reminded that our loved ones are gifts given to us by God, the less we will blame God when He takes them back. In its deepest sense, loss is when we give back to God what was never really ours in the first place. Having faith does not mean we don't mourn this loss. It means that despite our sadness, we place our hope in God's promise that death is not an end, and that there will come a day when we'll be reunited. The Prophet Muhammad himself reminds the lovers of God that all earthly separation is temporary, for in the end you will be with those whom you love. 6. Beyond just mourning for someone we have lost, we are encouraged to give in their name, because kindness and charity transcend the barriers of the grave. Doing charity in the name of a loved one not only strengthens the bond between us and them, it also invites their presence into the lives of other people, allowing their legacy to live on beyond their time on earth. Death may separate us from physically witnessing those who have died, but the love we feel in our hearts continues to transform our souls. Goodbyes are only for those who love with their eyes. Because for those who love with heart and soul, there is no such thing as separation. Death has nothing to do with going away. The sun sets, the moon sets, but they are not gone. A candle's flame may die when it burns to the end of its wick, but the light and heat that it gave off lives on. Like candles, our bodies may melt away with time, but the seeds of love we planted on earth will continue to flower beyond our finite lives. The ones we have lost are like stars in the sky. Despite having passed away, we continue to experience their light within our lives. It is also important to acknowledge that, entangled with our grief for the loss of a loved one, is often fear about our own eventual departure. Despite the pain of losing someone we love, the hidden blessing is that it is a divine reminder to live more fully, love more fiercely, and to give more freely, for any moment could be our last. This is not your home. Your body is a vehicle that God has given you as a loan, and this world is just a bus stop along the way from God back to God. This worldly life is not forever. The impermanence of life is beautifully depicted in the following story. A mystic from Kufa set out on a journey to meet the spiritual master Abu Hussein for the first time. When the mystic walked into Abu Hussein's house, he was surprised to find no furniture. The perplexed seeker asked the holy man, "Why does your house have no furniture?" The master smiled and ecstatically asked, "Why didn't you bring furniture with you?" The confused seeker said, "I am a traveler. What use would furniture do me?" The master laughed and said, "Ah, yes, my friend, but I too am a traveler. I will only be on this earth for a few short days, and then I will return back to my real home. Our real home is not one money can buy. Our real home is with God." This story mirrors the words of the Prophet Muhammad, who said, "The worldly comforts are not for me. I am like a traveler who takes rest under a tree in the shade and then goes on his way." 7. As one mystic profoundly stated in reference to the briefness of our journey on earth, when we are born, the adhan, or call to prayer, is recited in our ears but no prayer is performed. When we die, no adhan is recited but a prayer is performed. This is because the adhan of your birth belongs to the prayer of your death. That's how short life is. 8. We are not residents of our houses, countries, or even our bodies. Rather, we are visitors. And just as no visitor would decorate a hotel room they were staying in for only a few days, do not waste time obsessing over the adornments of a life on earth that you do not own. Instead, decorate your spirit with good deeds, for that is the only currency that transcends time and space. Invest in what is eternal instead of this mortal life. Die before you die. Kill your attachments to the illusions of this life, your ego, your reputation, your pride, and your material possessions, because the more you let go of this world, the higher you will rise. 9. It is only when we kill our attachment to the mortal desires of the self that we are freed from anxiety around losing what is perishing. In essence, this is a voluntary death of illusion, where we are drawn to the light of the divine until all separation is extinguished. This is the station of fana fi Allah, or dissolving the separate self into the infinite ocean of God's love. Between the death of the ego and the death of the body is when we may truly experience life. However, it is important to remember that spiritual rebirth is not an event, it is a process. We are not called to reject the blessings of our worldly life, but rather, we are reminded to not become enslaved by our love. Detachment is not that you should own nothing, but that nothing should own you. Imam Ali, as a wise man, once prayed to God, "O Lord, please do not allow death to reach me before I am annihilated." He understood that if we give everything to God that death can take, including ourselves, then once death arrives, there is no struggle or pain. We find lasting peace when we fully surrender to the journey of our return to the divine light of Allah that is waiting to embrace us in its mystery and mercy. Impermanence and the hidden mercy of God in Islam. The impermanence of life is not seen as a punishment, but rather as an integral part of divine mercy. The hidden mercy of death is beautifully manifested through the following ancient story of a faithful king. A king commissioned a council of spiritual sages to come up with a motto that could remind him to be humble and grateful during the highs of life, while also inspiring patience and hope in times of sadness. After many nights of consultation, the wise men brought the king a ruby ring engraved with the words, "This too shall pass." The awareness of the impermanence of all earthly things and emotions gave the king hope that no matter how painful or difficult life became, the pain would not be forever. On the days when blessings dropped blossoms everywhere and life seemed perfect, the ring reminded the king to stay humble. The impermanence of life and all of its dramas is our greatest source of both hope and humility. With death, we are reminded of the mercy of God, for if everything were endless, our sorrows and our pains would last forever as well. Death begs us to anchor our happiness not on what is fleeting, but rather on Allah, whose love is eternal and unchanging. Death reminds us that the only thing that is real and unchanging is God. Everything else in existence, whether it be good or bad, will eventually perish. As the great Tibetan master Jetsun Milerpa poetically said, the sound of thunder, although deafening, is harmless. The rainbow, despite its brilliant colors, does not last. This world, though it appears pleasant, is like a dream. The pleasures of the senses, though agreeable, ultimately lead to disillusionment. 10. When we turn our focus from our egos and mortal bodies toward the everlasting and mystical breath of God within us, like a snowflake in the sun, the fear of death slowly dissolves. Our spiritual essence cannot die, because our spirits live beyond our time on earth. This world only breaks the shells of the seeds of who you think you are, so that God can manifest the tree of your true essence, which you have always carried inside of you. The cloud does not blame nature for tearing it apart every time the earth's flowers and fruits long for rain. Gold does not curse the fire that purifies it. A mother does not grieve the loss of her placenta once she has handed her baby. When we see that with difficulty there is ease, 94:5, we do not mourn what is lost. As the Quran says, if God finds anything good in your hearts, He will give you something better than what has been taken from you. God is all-forgiving and all-merciful, 870. Just as the winter strips the trees of dead leaves to create room for spring blossoms, God takes from us to give to us. True peace lies in never holding on to anything tighter than we hold on to God. If you are tired of pain, stop getting attached to things that pass away. Aru Barzak, poet, let go of what is perishing and hold on to what is real and eternal, God. After all, everything that is mortal is by its very definition a veil before an immortal God. Trust that the spirit inside of you cannot be shattered. Only the mortal illusions of this world can be broken. Let the wildfires of divine decree burn every ounce of your ego until it is transformed into compost for the garden of faith that has been dying to come to life. Death unveils the truth the lovers of God throughout time have said. This life is a dream, and when we die we wake up to see this world without its makeup. 11. Death unveils our masks. It kills only that which is false, for the truth never dies. 1781. For the ones whose will is surrendered to the will of God, who live in truth, who plant love wherever life takes them, there is no fear in death, for death is a return to the origin of love, al-Wadud. For the ones who try the best they can to be kind, for the ones who strive to be faithful, for the ones who sincerely seek God's mercy when they sin, in death, they are met with compassion and forgiveness. But for the tyrant, or for the one who oppresses others, or creates separation through watering the weeds of hatred, death is a source of pain. Death is the door to the day of judgment where God balances the scales of justice left uneven from our time on earth. Death is the cosmic equalizer. No matter how rich, famous, or beautiful you may be, no one can escape the fate of death. Everyone will experience the grave. Death reminds us that we will not be saved by our wealth, our lovers, our children, or by our own hands. Death does not discriminate by age, race, or faith. The Quran makes it clear that no one knows in what land they will die, 31:34, and when the decreed time for death arrives, no one can delay it for a single hour, nor can they bring it forward, 1661. The inevitability of death is profoundly illustrated in the following parable. One day, the angel of death manifested as a man and entered the court of Prophet Solomon. The angel locked eyes with one of Solomon's subjects, giving him a fierce and bewildered look. When the angel of death left the kingdom, the subject ran up to Solomon and asked who he was. When Solomon said it was the angel of death, the man began to tremble as he fearfully said, "I am afraid from the way he looked at me that he will come for my soul. Please order the winds to take me far away to the soils of India so I can be protected." Solomon, who had been given control over the forces of nature by God, ordered the winds to take the man to India. The next day, when Solomon saw the angel of death, he asked him, "Why did you look at that man in my court so severely yesterday?" The angel replied, "I was surprised to see him in your kingdom, because I was ordered to take his life just a few hours later, thousands of miles away in India." This story profoundly confronts us with the fact that if we attempt to run away from death, we will only run toward it. As the Quran says, running away will not profit you if you are running away from death, 33:16. Because when it is your time, wherever you are, death will overtake you, even if you are in lofty towers, 478. Death teaches us to hold on to only God, because the emptiness left behind by loss can only be eternally filled with the light of God's grace. The spiritual notion of dying before you die is about letting go of all that is perishing to begin with, to be reborn into eternity now. The lovers of God do not fear death, because they are with God now and know they will be with God when they die too. Our entire lives, we have literally been dying to meet God. Aru Barzak, poet, as Rumi says, "Everyone is so afraid of death, but the real mystics just laugh. Nothing tyrannizes their hearts. What strikes the oyster shell does not damage the pearl. While your body will die and be returned to the earth, which composed it, your spirit is like an everlasting pearl that will forever remain in the ocean of God's grace." If you fear death, this is why fear of death is a sign that we are holding on to something other than Allah, to something whose foundation is contingent. As long as our happiness is dependent on things we cannot control, we will never experience contentment. Inner peace is dependent on our connection with God, because God alone is forever and unchanging. The basis of Islam is surrender, because it is only through surrendering our false sense of control that we experience true freedom. In a sense, death either pushes you to fear or it pushes you to faith. When we accept that we have no control over the future and rely entirely on God, we feel peace. As the Quran says, "Whoever believes in his Lord will not fear loss or oppression," 72:13. But if we turn to ourselves to manage the unknown future, we will find ourselves riddled with feelings of anxiety and despair. When we acknowledge the place within us that thinks we know better than God and gently and with compassion turn our reliance from ourselves to the divine, we begin to feel the serenity that comes with surrender. It is only when we lean into death while holding on to Allah that we begin to transcend our anxiety around it. But the problem is we shy away from death, cutting it out of our conversation, labeling it morbid, and calendaring it for another time as if we know how much time we have before death knocks inconveniently on our doors. We sweep death under the rug as if we will not one day be swept under the rug of the earth. Death is not just something that happens to other people, it will happen to you and me. The Prophet tells us to think of our death and to visit graveyards, 12 because cemeteries may be places of silence, but the message is loud. We will spend more time beneath the ground than above it. Our culture and society has taught us that death is something we must cure, but death is not something we can fix because it is not a flaw in the system that needs troubleshooting. Allah intentionally made every single one of us with death programmed into the software of His creation. Death is not an accident, it is intentional, for it is through death that eternal life has meaning. Without separation, you cannot actualize the value of connection and proximity. If we categorize death as a disease, we will end up seeing our grief as something that needs to be fixed instead of as a reminder that death is a natural part of the human condition. It is only when we turn our grief and feelings of loss to a higher power that a deep spiritual transformation begins. The spiritual path is not about bypassing our feelings, but about being present with our pain and inviting the light of Allah into our wounds. Denying our pain will not help us heal. Attempting to escape our pain is like trying to outrun our shadow. Just because we are struggling with our grief, it doesn't mean we are any less faithful. All the prophets of God went through hardships and deeply grieved for the losses that they felt. In the Quran, it states that, when the prophet Jacob lost his sons, he declared the following: "I only complain of my suffering and my grief to Allah." Quran 12:86. Awakening in faith does not mean we become immune to pain, but that we put that pain in its rightful place in the hands of Allah. We can always seek the help of others, but we must always begin and end the path of our healing by turning to Allah in prayer. We must be honest with how we feel, because we cannot receive God's deep healing if we continuously avoid facing our pain. It is here, in the divine crucible of pain, that the alchemy of the soul begins. When the sacred and mundane braid together, the separation between us and the divine begins to dissolve. It is in this sacred landscape that the veils drop as the face of Allah begins to emerge. Reflecting upon the face of all creation, from the trees to the seas, from the stars to the bees, everything begins to speak of God. Even the existence of death becomes a call of return from God, a call to remember who we are and whose we are. You are going to die. Death is the greatest preacher we will ever meet, for it teaches us to hold tightly to only Allah, for everything is perishing save the face of God. 55:26-27. When we reflect on our death, it naturally makes us prioritize what is most important in our life. The Quran says, "Every soul shall taste death," 29:57, but the question is, how many will truly taste the sweetness of life? It is not death that we fear. What we fear is not living the life we know we were created to live. We are afraid of running out of time before we are able to manifest our soul's purpose. Death is the ultimate confrontation. When we think of death, we regret all the time we have lost in procrastination. When death arrives, all of our secrets, sins, and shortcomings will be manifested. We will be confronted with all the dreams we did not pursue, the repentance we did not make, and the charity we did not give. Live as long as you may, but know that one day you will die. Love whomever you wish, but know that one day you will taste separation. Do whatever you want, but know that one day you will be held accountable. 13. Imam al-Ghazali, 11th century mystic. The inevitability of death confronts us and begs us to ask, are we living each day as if it is our last? Death forces us to reflect on whether we are living a meaningful life or just trying to kill time as time kills us. Imam Ali said, "Do for this life as if you will live forever. Do for the hereafter as if you will die tomorrow." The Prophet tells us to meditate on death so that we fully take advantage of our limited time on earth. 14. The Quran says that Allah created death and life to test which of you is most excellent in action. He is the Almighty, the All-Forgiving. 67:2. It is death that calls us to seize the day and be sons and daughters of the moment, living and honoring the present as a priceless blessing given to us by God. We don't get to decide when or how we will die, but we can choose how we live. In fact, in one narration, when a man asked the Prophet when the day of judgment would be, the Prophet profoundly replied by saying, "What have you prepared for it?" 15. The Prophet was confronting the man with what really matters. In another narration, the Prophet says, "If the final hour comes while you have a palm sapling in your hands, and it is possible to plant it before the hour comes, you should plant it." 16. The Quran describes the day of judgment as the day when all human beings are resurrected to face God and to be held accountable for their good and bad deeds. Similar to biblical accounts, the Quran describes this day with vivid imagery. The Quran tells us that the earth will shake. 99:1. The mountains will be like carded wool. 101:5. People will be scattered like moths. 101:4. The stars will fall from the sky 81:2. The oceans will boil over 81:6. The sun and moon will merge 75:9. The heavens will be rolled up like scrolls 21:104. And the dead will be summoned back to life 36:51. On this day, all of existence will bow before God alone. This is the day when the scales of justice left uneven on earth will be balanced, and God's mercy will be more abundant than we could ever imagine. No one knows when they will die or when the day of judgment will come. The only thing that is in our power is how we actively choose to live the one life that Allah has given us in this very moment. Instead of worrying about when we will die, it serves us better to focus on what we can do to positively affect this world. As the 11th century Persian scholar Abu Sa'id Abulkar said, "You were born crying and everyone around you was laughing. Strive to live in a way that when you die you are laughing and everyone around you is crying." 17. When you become aware of how close death is to you, that tomorrow morning you might not wake up, how does that make you feel? Do you feel crippled by fear, infused with anxiety, and unable to be present? Or do you feel a surge of urgency, a divine motivation to live each day to its absolute fullest when we trust God, accepting that our time is limited has a way of dissolving our fears, breaking our pride, and humbling us? The unknown nature of our death inspires us to apologize when we are wrong, to forgive others when they are wrong, to give freely of what we love, to not hold back our words of kindness, to be honest with our feelings, to pray with every ounce of our spirits, to not put off doing our soul's work, to see this moment as the only moment we have, to manifest God's qualities of love, mercy, compassion, and equality upon all people, without discrimination. As Rumi says, with life as short as a half-taken breath, don't plant anything but love. But you were not made for death. If God created us for just this life, then there would be no death. Death is not the opposite of life, non-existence is. Death is our evidence that we were made for more than just life. As Rumi says, "My soul is from elsewhere. I am sure of that, and I intend to end up there." Death is not an entrance into nothingness. Rather, it is the birth canal we must travel through to be born into eternal life. Similar to how we wake up from a dream by opening our eyes, when we die we do not disappear, we simply open our eyes to another reality. Death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come. Rabindranath Tagore, 20th century Indian poet, as the Quran says, "And you see the earth barren, but when we send down upon it rain, it stirs and swells and brings forth of every kind of beautiful herbage." 22:5. Just as dead winter seeds are resurrected every spring, death is not our end, but the next season of our spiritual growth. As Sheikh Sidi Muhammad Al-Jamal beautifully says, "Listen to the sound of death, which in reality is the song of eternal life. Do not grieve leaving behind what you love of this world, because this realm is only a fragrance of the world to come. The value of this world compared to that of the hereafter is like what your finger brings from the sea when you put it in and then take it out." 18 Prophet Muhammad. Through death you go from scent to taste, from form to essence, from objects of love to the origin of love, al-wadud. When we die, our consciousness does not cease to exist, but instead it becomes purified and unveiled. This allows us to see the truth as it is, instead of how we imagine or interpret it to be. When you die, you do not lose what you love, you become a part of it. For the faithful lovers of God, their death date is seen as a celebration, the heavenly homecoming. When we die in a state of God consciousness, the last of the veils between us and God dissolve, and we witness the face of God's beauty and love. Death is not the great unknown, because we are not going somewhere unfamiliar, but rather returning to our origin. We are like waves returning to the same eternal ocean that once inspired us to rise. To God we belong, and to Him we shall return. Quran 2:156. When we are surrendered to God's will, death becomes our ultimate liberation. A faithful death is an escape from the limiting cage of the ego, where the spirit bird is finally free to expand its wings into the embrace of God. Death is not the end, rather, it is the beginning of forever. O Allah, I pray that you help me remember that my time on this earth is short and that any day could be my last. Allah, help me live every moment of my life in service to you and to those who are oppressed, needy, poor, and hopeless. My Lord, help me to apologize when I wrong others, to return what was entrusted with me, and to always be humble enough to take accountability for my mistakes. O Lord, I pray that my awareness of my impermanence inspires me to be more kind, generous, and forgiving to all people who are suffering and in need of love. Allah, remind me that this life is not the only life I have been given. Help me remember that my real life begins whenever you decide for me to leave this body behind. O Allah, you are the creator of the heavens and the earth. You are my guardian in this world and in the life to come. Make me die as one who has submitted to your will and unite me with the righteous ones. 12:101. In your eternal names I pray, reflection contemplating death. When contemplating death, we receive a deeper understanding of how we want to live. The following practice helps remind us of what we truly value in life and calls us to live life consciously. Lay down on the ground, with your hands overlapping on your stomach. Close your eyes and imagine that you are taking your final breaths of earthly life. Notice what comes up for you. Do you have any regrets in this moment? How do you wish you would have spent your time and resources? What risks do you regret not taking? Is there something you wish you would have said to someone you love? How could you have showed up differently with your loved ones? What amends would you like to have made? What dreams would you have pursued? What would you have wanted to say to Allah? How could you have been closer to Allah? Write down your answers and be conscious of the feelings that come up for you. Make the intention of doing these things today instead of waiting for a tomorrow that may never come. The way to heaven is within. Shake the wings of love, for when love's wings have become strong, there is no need to trouble about a ladder.